welcome to Carolyn Talk. I'm your host, Carolyn Hines, film critic and journalist, and this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives, their work in the industry, and what inspires them. And today, I am joined by filmmaker Marlon Ransom and his son, Tyler Ransom, to talk about a documentary, In the Shed, which chronicles Tyler's experience with a chronic illness called Nephrotic Syndrome and his love of jiu-jitsu as well as jazz music and how that inspires him and also how it relates to his illness. And I'm actually so glad that I'm getting to speak to both of you because I don't know if you know this, but I'm chronically ill as well. I have multiple sclerosis. So I have relapse remitting multiple sclerosis, which is a chronic illness. And like Tyler's condition is an invisible disability as well. So I always try to speak to people who have films about chronic illness because it helps to bring awareness. And that's one of the main reasons that you created this film, In the Shed, Marlon and Tyler, is to bring awareness about this disease, nephrotic syndrome, which I actually have heard about before because I knew of a little boy back home in Barbados who actually had it years ago. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, I know what this is. But I also got to learn more about it, as well as Tyler and your family and his love of jazz. And I can't wait to talk to the both of you. But as usual, I like to have my guests say a bit about themselves first. So for you, Tyler, I want you to talk a bit about yourself and what it was like for you to have your dad make this documentary about you. And then for you, Marlon, to talk about what inspired you to create this documentary, because this isn't actually the first, based on what I've seen in the documentary, this isn't the first video journaling that you've done of Tyler's experience. So Tyler, let's go with you first.
That was such a nice introduction.
Oh, thank you.
It was really nice having the support of my father and my whole family documenting this process. Since growing up, our whole thing was spreading awareness and ways that we can help improve the lives of others as well as myself. So finally having this platform to do it and the support of my father, it was really inspiring to me and to everyone who helped out. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I'm just so excited to talk about it and that my father's here. I don't really do podcasts with him, so this is going to be really fun to hear his thoughts and everything as well.
And for you, Marlon?
Well, I have to tell you, I did not know that you had MS. That's really gives you a different take, I'm sure, on what you saw when you watched the documentary. So I'm interested in hearing your actual story, to be honest with you. So I have to ask again, what's your question you're asking?
What inspired me, based on what I've seen in the documentary, this documentary is like pieced together with various video journals you've done of Tyler's experience with nephrotic syndrome, but as well as his love of jiu-jitsu and jazz. But what made you decide I'm going to make a full documentary, because it's practically a feature length because it's just over 50 minutes long, so it's not a short film at all. So what inspired you to say, you know what, I'm going to make a full-length documentary about my son's life?
Well, that's a great question. Well, it started with journaling, as you call it, video journaling, vlogging, what people call today, from when Tyler was very young, like 5-6 years old. And that stemmed from the fact that I enjoy being in control on pretty much every aspect of my life to the best of my ability. And this was something I had no control over. So as Tyler would have relapses and be in the hospital, I did not like the fact that I could not help him. I had to listen to doctors, and then which I'm not even going to get on that topic, but so I just tried to figure out what can I control. And so then I started filming things and trying to just instill positiveness into him, and that, hey, we're going to win no matter whatever win means to him or to me at that time was just being in control, if that makes any sense. So as he got older, or he kind of outgrew the website we created called healingtyler.com, which I always asked him, like, are you comfortable being filmed on this? Or like, you have a relapse, are you comfortable if I take pictures of you? And because it was equal involvement, so to speak. And as he got older and kind of outgrew the Healing Tyler website, I had all of this footage, not all that had been released. And I just tried to figure out what could we do collectively to help more people, because he had a large community he had built up throughout the years from doing jujitsu, from the videos we'd send out. I mean, a lot of the videos had been, and I apologize for being long-winded, but a lot of the videos had been nephrologists from different countries like Vietnam, India, Israel, Sweden had reached out and had dubbed his videos into their language and using them to show to parents and family members whose kids were suffering from nephrotic syndrome as well. Because what I found is a lot of times people, if you look at Tyler now, you don't see someone who's fighting a chronic illness. People would go, he doesn't look sick. And a lot of times that was family members. So they could watch a video of Tyler talking about it or being in a full-on relapse, and those family members would see someone else suffering and go, wow, I get it now. So my idea was, how could I find a way to piece all this footage together? And so that's what I did. Let me get Tyler and Skylar, his sister, to do a long form interview and then intermittently cut and place, edit things into it. So that's the long answer.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on some things that you mentioned, but one of the things you said there just now was about being in control. And I know, and that's something that I noticed very early on in the film, because like you at the top of the film, like after his mom brings him home and like she's like, he's swollen and like she didn't understand, like when there's a scene where you take him to the hospital and you said that you started to take photographs because you wanted to be able to hold the medical staff at the hospital accountable if something went wrong with your son. And I thought that's something that's so, especially now with the, I guess you could say almost like the political climate and the social awareness of personal advocacy, and personal agency when it comes to the medical field, because Black people of color, we are still dismissed by medical staff, especially in North America. Like you guys are in the US, but I live here in Canada. And I've had my own personal experiences with medical staff, with doctors dismissing my pain and dismissing my concerns and not listening to me fully. So when you talked about taking the picture and you're like, if something goes wrong, I'm going to have you, and you, I have evidence that you were here and you guys can like say that no one who was involved wasn't. And I thought that was so important, especially because Tyler was like 2 years old at the time. So talk about that aspect of having control over, even though you as a parent don't have like actual control in a medical emergency, because the only people who can have any kind of quote unquote control is the medical staff, because they're the ones who know about the medications that need to be administered, what IV drips to use, like what medications to use. So like you don't have any say in that, but you're like, I can at least document what's happening. So talk about beginning your experience as Tyler's father and his chronicler at that point.
Well, I'm laughing because you just brought up the most polarizing point, most polarizing scene, point, whatever you want to call it, of the documentary. And it's been split, it's a political topic, by race, meaning I got a lot of pushback, not personally to my face, but online from people who'd send emails who would talk about, look at this aggressive man. Oh my God, I can't believe it. And I said, it's interesting because I think if I was someone with less melanin, I think they would go, what a strong, engaged father. Yeah, I wasn't playing. You know what I mean? Like, that's my son. And I was letting them all know, including the person who was cleaning the room. Everybody, if something happens to my son, something's going to happen to everyone in here. And that's a watered down version of what I said. So anyway, if that answers your question.
It does. And for you, Tyler, like, what have you learned from your father? Because there's many things that I will discuss, but what have you learned from your father with regards to having that kind of agency around your own healthcare and know that especially now that you're older, you're in university and like when you were discussing things with the doctors, you're able to have to speak for yourself. Whereas before, like it would have been your parents, because like you were a minor, as a minor, you don't really have much say legally in what goes on with you medically. Like your parents will ask your opinions, the doctor will discuss with you, like as we saw in the film, like the doctors explain everything to you. But now that you're older and you're more aware of what it actually means to have advocacy and agency over your own health issues and over your own body and how you can relate to doctors, what have you learned about that process throughout the years, especially at watching your parents speak on your behalf to the medical staff?
It was really wild. I think I took it for granted growing up, because as I became an adult and went to my first few doctor visits alone, they didn't really feed me the information. It was more so they just threw it at me, and
yeah,
I was so used to my dad acting as a filter and basically digesting what they say and filtering it for me in terms that I could take in. So not having that for like the first few doctor visits, I was like, what are they saying? What's happening? So I had to call him afterwards and tell him that this was happening and what I should do. But it was very eye-opening, because even in cases where I'm not at the doctor's office, but where I'm at school and I feel like asking a question and I don't really have the strongest agency. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm pretty laid back and calm. And I don't really have the strong presence that my dad does. But growing up, I've learned to follow that gut feeling and to take what you want, essentially. I don't know, closed mouths don't get fed, and that was always a lesson my father showed me and displayed.
For sure. My mother, that's something my mom used to say, closed mouths don't get fed. But the thing about, I think for people with chronic illness in particular, is like we have to see the doctors so often, and like sometimes the doctors, like when I watch when I watch medical shows now, and I don't really watch most medical shows now because like I know it's all lies and like it's drama, but the way how the medical system operates and how the doctors and like things like surgeries are done, I'm like, that's a whole lie. That's not what happens. And like, but the thing about being chronically ill, like you have to know so much about your body. We have to learn to listen to our bodies, and we have to learn when not to overdo it. We have to learn. And I think that to me, that ties into agency, not only with regards to medical professionals, but also with ourselves, because the doctors and the nurses and the specialists will tell us, okay, don't get stressed out. Don't overdo it physically, because that could trigger a relapse, that could stress out your body. Don't do these kind of things. But it can take years to learn how to actually pinpoint when it's just too much for our bodies. It's like for me still, I'm 39, but still, and I was diagnosed in 2017, and I was experiencing symptoms from like long before, but I'm still learning when my body is sending me signals to pull back. I'm still learning that, okay, this tiredness that I'm feeling, this fatigue that I'm feeling, isn't just my chronic fatigue. This is signs of an impending relapse if I don't check myself. So for you, Tyler, talk about how you're learning to listen to your body more, especially because you take part in such a physical sport like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a sport where you sweat a lot, which is something that our bodies lose like fluids when we sweat a lot. But when you're doing a sport like that, contact sport like that, your body is put through more stress than if you were doing like a typical, like a regular like sport. And like you have to learn to listen to your body more. So like what have you learned about your body so far?
One of the biggest things for me is actually checking my urine. I've been doing that since a kid. So every day I have to go pee in the morning. And I could tell now basically by the color of it what kind of day it's going to be. Normally when it's really dark, I'm like, oh man, so it's a lot of protein. And then that's when I really catch myself and I'm like, oh, like I feel lightheaded. Like I think today, like I need to rest. Or in other cases, when my pee comes out and it's clear, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's why I didn't wake up with any fatigue and like I feel fine. And even doing jujitsu and things like that, I think it was sometimes my body would feel like it's not up to do anything, but my ego would like be like, nah, like I have to show this white belt how we do it. And I don't know, growing up I had to find that balance and be like, okay, as much as I need to like calm my ego down and really listen to how my body's doing, and that required a lot of meditating off the mat and looking for signs like my hands don't grip as strong or my legs feel a bit more heavier than normal. But key things like that I've picked up throughout the years that I still use today to get a key feeling on how the day is going to be.
And for you, Marlon, this is a question I don't often get to ask to people, because most of the people that I know are chronically ill are like grown adults, so they don't have the like I don't know their parents, and like they don't really need their parents to like speak for them, because again, their parents are like also super old too. But for you as a parent of a child who is chronically ill, what have you learned about being a support system without being an overbearing support system? Because there's a very fine line between being supportive and then being, overbearing. Like as I said, I'm 39. My mom just turned 70 and she still thinks I'm a child. She'll tell me things. I'm like, Mom, I know my body. At first, I'm always like, first of all, you're in Barbados. You can't come and tell me what I can't do. But she's still always like super concerned. She'll come and tell me, she'll look at the weather forecast and say, all of a sudden it's going to be very sunny today. You have to watch this up, because like for MS, like for the type of MS I have heat intolerance, which means I can get heat strokes very easily. My body temperature naturally is higher than normal. So like my natural body temperature is 99.1 degrees, whereas the natural normal baseline body temperature for most people is 98.3. So I'm already like above normal. So then once it gets higher, I have to make sure that I stay cool, that I'm not out in the sun too much, like I actually swell up once I get if I get heat intolerance, if I start to get a thing, because my hands start to swell up, my legs and my arms swell up, and then that makes it kind of difficult. It's kind of like you, Taylor, like my legs it's like actually painful to walk. So, but my mom, so she called me from in Barbados and tell me the temperature is going to be like so and so in Canada today. You need to be careful. And I'd be like, and I have to rein myself in and tell myself she's loving, she's just concerned for you. But for you, Marlon, especially now that Tyler's getting older, he's an adult, he's at school, he's all the way across the other side of the country from where you are. Like, how have you learned to like toe that line of like not being like too smothering as a parent, especially saying too, as you say, like to be in control?
Well, I have to say, first of all, respect to your mom. And so many people do not have parents and do not have parents that are engaged in their lives. So when you said that, I didn't hear someone overbearing. I heard someone who's loving. And
that's the difference, right? I'm the child and you're a person. You get it.
I wish I had a mother like you have. I didn't have that. So that's the first thing I'd say to you personally. In reference to your question, when you say overbearing, I guess I'd have to ask you, what do you mean when you say that exactly?
Okay, well, I guess it's because that's a phrase that Bajans use a lot. So when I say overbearing, like for instance, how would I explain it? So like we're almost okay, like so like using my mom as the example. Like for me, sometimes I understand, like I understand she's my mom and she's concerned and she's showing that concern, and
she loves you.
And she loves me, and that's actually a benefit and a privilege, as you're saying. Like not everyone has that, but then also like it comes to the point where she's also trying to control what I do, even though she's not in the same country, where she's like trying to tell me, don't go outside, don't do this, don't do that, so like it's like there is a difference between showing concern and then being overly concerned and then being controlling. And I have to remind you,
I understand your question. And I can answer it. I can tell you that from when Tyler was very young, I always, even when we went to the doctor, and a shout out to his two main nephrologists he's had, Dr. Camille and Dr. Pulianda, who are like a part of our family, but it didn't just start out like that. It took a lot of back and forth and mutual respect, however else you want to frame that. But I always had Tyler and his sister like, okay, go research the labs. So they could know when I was talking to the doctors what we're talking about. Like research when they're talking about you're spilling protein, look at the labs and see what it is. So my job as both of my child's parents was to teach them to be on their own. As I always would say to them, what would happen if I'm no longer here? I want you to be able to function seamlessly. So, and Tyler and I wrote a book together, and I learned begrudgingly that he, who is very much unlike me, whereas his sister is very much like me, Tyler is very calm. He's very chill. I'm not. So I had to learn to respect him more so in the book writing process and when he wanted to do something that I didn't agree with, I had to learn to compromise. And when he like playing music, I'd say, I really like this song. You should redo this. And he would push back. And so I had to learn to respect him. And as he's gotten older and lives across, he lives in New York. I live in Los Angeles. It's more along the lines of there's mutual respect, I would think. And I allow him to have his space to be him. He has no choice but to allow me to be me. And I don't really think there was ever really overbearing. I think there was, as he would know, there was love. There was love from a dad who wanted to make sure my son had and still has more opportunities than I've ever had. So I think it's probably a better question for him to ask if I've ever been overbearing or if I am, or it's probably a better question for him.
Tyler.
Hey.
You want to answer your dad? You want to answer your dad's question?
I don't think it was ever overbearing. I think it was me just learning how to live with training wheels and knowing inside when it was time for me to take them off. I never took any of it for granted. It was really nice having that, because I also recognized that a lot of people didn't have that. Because growing up, whenever I would talk to friends, they'd make it a point to emphasize that they weren't that close with their fathers. So I think in turn that made me take what many would probably consider him being overbearing as just how my dad is. It was a gift.
Just being present.
Yeah, just being present. But that's how I would answer that question.
Right. And like as you said just now, Marlon, like you have to learn how to get to this place during the book writing process in your book, I'm Chronically Positive. So talk about this book and what started this, and even thinking about it and hearing you, both of you discuss Tyler's personality as being more laid back, being more relaxed. I think even the title of the book kind of describes your personality, Tyler. Where like because you're more laid back, like you take things more positively, or you're the kind of person that I'm sensing that is not just overly optimistic, but you're the person to look to the positive side of things first. Like I'm a half of a glass half full kind of guy rather than half empty. Like there's always, I'm kind of the same. When people say, oh, this is a terrible situation, my first reaction was, at least there's a silver lining here somewhere. There has to be.
You get it.
Yeah. And for like being chronically ill, like the world is still learning how to like not see disability as a bad thing, as like not this thing that stifles your life and this thing that ends your life. In that is like, oh, you're like, oh my gosh, I have a chronic illness. Oh, woe is me. It's like you have to learn how to like get up every day and like do this thing, like you have to learn how to live. And I think that's the aspect of like just the book title alone is just saying you're chronically ill, but you have to be positive about the situation. You have to always be positive about being chronically ill. Like, because for me, I see it as like, I always try to, even there are days when I'm just tired. Because I have chronic fatigue, and there are days where I'm just like, I'm so tired of being tired, but I'm still able to find something to smile about. I'm still able to find something to be positive about. I'm still find things to be positive about. So for you, Tyler, like what went in the book writing process? What was it the thing that you learned the most, not only about yourself, but also maybe about your dad or about how people view people with chronic illnesses?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned was the value of patience. Not even with the writing process with my father and I, but when talking to my friends about my illness and what we were doing with the book. They didn't really understand. And in the Healing Tyler days, even now when I tell people about my illness, I look at it as a teaching tool. And I think writing the book, I was able to realize that while I can teach it to them, they'll never really understand. But with time, they'll learn to proper understand where I'm coming from a bit more. And I think I saw some of that with my dad as well whilst we were writing, because if you read the book, I think it's pretty obvious when you could tell his parts versus mine, because his parts are a bit more him and my parts are a bit more, mine. But I just really learned just the really valuing time and patience with others and yourself, and giving yourself the time to really feel things out.
And Marlon, what did you learn about yourself and about your son and about people with chronic illnesses while you were in the process of writing the book with Tyler?
Well, my main focus has always been to put chronic illness not in the front, so to speak, or I think I've always told Tyler since like age 5 or probably younger, do not let this illness define you. This illness is not who you are. So I'd say that first and foremost, but I can also say that he taught me, I learned a lot about him because we're most definitely not alike. Like there's times like there was one specific time, which I still have the picture, but it's in the car because I always keep it with me, when he was like in the 5th grade and he had a relapse. And I'm going to where your question is.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Take your time.
And it was right before picture day, like 2 weeks before. So I already knew, he's not going to want his picture taken like this. So of course I'm that guy, as you know. I went to the principal and the principal said it's okay if he takes his picture later. So I let him know that. But then on picture day, he got up and was putting on his good clothes. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he said, how I look is not who I am. And I remember I've never cried in front of Tyler, but I've cried when I went to the bathroom because I was like, damn, he's actually listened to me, And he said, my friends know who I am. And for people that don't know, they can ask and I'll tell them why my face looks like this. So it was interesting writing the book because some of the topics and things he did, like he said, the first thing I do is I make a expiration date. And I was like, I was legitimately wondering, what is he talking about? And he said, I'm sad for 2 days and then I'm done. And I don't revisit it. I don't 3 days later, go back to being sad again. I'm like, I'm going to give myself 2 days to be super sad. And I just thought to myself, wow, I never would have thought of this as a kid. I was sad, period. So I learned a lot about how his coping mechanisms in reference to of course I'm his father. So I'm going to the hospital with him and I'm angry and whatever else emotions I'm having. But I learned the emotions he was having, which was very interesting. Okay, how is he processing all this? I knew how I was processing it as his father. But so I think that's what I learned. I learned a lot about how he copes. And then I thought of ways I could use some of those tactics, if you will, myself in just everyday life. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
And we've talked a bit about both of you, and I want to talk about your sister Skylar, because I thought it was interesting that she's not only because she's your sister, but she kind of works, I think. I was surprised to see her being the person that asked you the questions in the documentary. And then when we got to see the various video journals throughout the years, like she's she's in them a lot, and we get to hear her talk about you, and then she's also asking you those questions even when she was young. So I want to know like your relationship with your sister and how she has helped you as an older brother, of course, but then also just as you, Tyler, and being a support system for you, because I just think it's actually amazing that she has such an interactive part of your life in with regards to your illness, because there will be people that if they have an older child who is sick, they, you know, and I think this is like a cultural thing because it happens a lot. I think with Black people where if one of the children is sick, you know, or even a parent is sick or a grandparent is sick, like they don't really tell, you know, like the younger kids what's really going on, you know, like they'll be like, we have to like kind of shield them from it because they won't understand. But that's not the case with your sister. Like your sister is fully informed and she's very active in your life. So I want you to talk about your sister first, Tyler, and then I'll ask you a bit more questions about that, Marlon.
For sure. Shout out Sky.
Yay.
My sister is the strongest person I know, to put it short. I think it wasn't something we could ever hide from her, especially because when I was growing up, like ages 5 through 10, I would have a lot of relapses. My face would be swollen majority of the time. So she just knew what was going on, and she'd accompany me to my hospital visits as well. And she'd spend the nights with me in the hospital, but she played a huge part. And I don't think she proper understands even now the role she played throughout the film. When you see these interviews of Sky and I, these different ages, it's because most of the time I was so used to only opening up to her. And that's why she's the main interviewer. She's like the key of everything, because I felt like despite everything going on, she was the one pure ear that I could talk to. And yeah, she still remains by my side, and I love her very much.
And for you, Marlon, tell me about the choice of having Sky be the person to ask him the questions in the documentary and make her such an integral part of the documentary, because like as Tyler just said, he opens up to her more than he does to other people. And that may have been an unconscious thing. Like I have a twin sister, so she's kind of like my confidant too, when she's not annoying me. She's not here, so she doesn't have to hear. But you know, but it's important to have, I think, an important relationship with that with your siblings. But tell me about the choice of making her such an integral part in the documentary, but also having her be involved in the video vlogs from such a young age.
Well, that's a great question. And I'll tell you that what I learned was from going to different conferences that on nephrotic syndrome, where nephrologists would come in and talk. I'd listen to other parents, talk to other parents, and I learned that the majority of them, two things, and this might be a little off topic, but one, I realized that a lot of the families, they were just the moms, because the dads had left, for lack of a better, I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. Dads had left, I don't know, from the stress of having a child with an illness or the financial stress or mental stress, et cetera. But a lot of were single moms, and a lot that had siblings, like, they had multiple children. The other children had a lot of behavioral problems. And the reason for that, as I would listen to them, was that they spent so much time with their sick kids at the hospital with doctors, et cetera, that they neglected their other kids. So my choice was, I'm going to involve Skylar as much as possible. And I'm surprised Tyler didn't tell you what Sky used to do whenever he got his blood drawn. Do you remember what she used to do, Tyler?
You get hers done too?
She would basically cause friction on my arm. She'd give me pain on my other arm.
Oh.
She didn't inflict pain.
Right, to make him not feel the pain from the needle. So basically, from me listening and seeing that other kids were having problems because they weren't getting attention, so they were doing whatever they could, normally negative things, to get attention. So I was like, I'm going to have her a part of the process so she doesn't feel left out. So that was always my plan. Like I don't want her to think she's less important, or she doesn't get attention, or she doesn't get, oh, and Tyler's sick, everything drops and we all have to go to the hospital. I'm letting her come as well. So that was the main reason for that. And I have to also say that I agree with Tyler that Skylar is the strongest person I also know. So
that's great. And yeah, it's important to make sure the kids understand what's happening to their siblings, because like when we were younger, my sister was she had asthma like really, really bad. She'd be going to the hospital like 2 or 3 days a week, and we'd have to go to the ER. My mom would always bring me along, and I sit with my sister in the ER while she was getting like respiratory therapy, while she's sitting down there for like 3-4 hours on a nebulizer. I was there, and so, and like when I got sick, my mom would bring my sister along, right? So it's to say, so I understand me, because like it's about making sure that you give each child equal treatment as much as possible. But it's also, I think it's also important to let the siblings understand what's going on, with their brother or their sister, to let them see that this is why mom or dad has to focus a bit more when like there's a relapse occurring, when there's like when the person is sick. They're like, okay, I understand, because they can see it for themselves, right? Because I'm the kind of person, I'm like, secrets don't do nothing but just make things more difficult, and I think that's one of the most important things for whether a child has a chronic illness or not, is for parents to be open with their children, because that also stops there being friction between the siblings, because that like a lot of parents don't realize that when their children have friction as in their relationship, a lot of it has to do with the parents, because the kids watch their parents, and they pick up on like things, and they see and they do and they repeat. So like they might a sibling might pick on a younger one or even an older one, because they see something that their parent does, and that kind of feeds off and influences their behavior. But a lot of parents don't recognize that. So I would applaud you for recognizing that. Say, you know what, I'm not going to do that, because that would create more struggles for Skylar, especially as being younger, like, so I think it's important that you did, and that you involved her in the documentary. I like seeing her involved in the documentary. And she's also very funny. Like when she was like, okay, enough about talking about your friends, let's talk about this thing and moving on. So I think she's very funny that way. And one of the things she moves on to, like, this is the topic now of the In the Shed, is the music, because In the Shed, the title of the film, comes from a concept in jazz, in the jazz music sphere, where the shed is like a place of, I guess you could say, rumination for musicians to think about their music and feel the music and get involved with the music. So I want you to talk about having music be such an important part of your life, Tyler, especially jazz music, and playing the I believe it's the bass guitar, and like using music as a way to express yourself and a way to be and a ways for to have something of your own, like the music is only yours in this instance, like that you don't have to focus on being sick, you don't have to focus on school. Don't mind you're in school for music, but you don't have, like, it's a way out, it's a way of escape and a coping mechanism, and like kind of a form of therapy for you.
It's funny because normally when people find out I'm a musician, they're like, oh cool, so like your parents are musicians, like you're from a musical family. And I always have to be like, no, we're not. No, I'm just the odd man out. But I don't know, since picking up the saxophone in middle school and listening to John Coltrane for the first time, it really struck me to my core. And I think one of the moment I look back on a lot is when I held my first guitar for the first time, and I didn't necessarily know what to do with it, but I knew in my heart and in my spirit that I was like, oh, okay, so like this is what I'm supposed to do, and since then it's always been a vessel for me to express what I couldn't. I remember I was hospitalized a lot as well, middle school and high school, and all I would do would be looking at guitar videos and picking things up from different players and just excited to go back home to play guitar. And it came to the point that actually growing up, my mom had to put a curfew on the refrigerator. So I would play guitar so much, and she'd be like, you have to stop at 10:30 because you have to go to bed. And it's my first love, and it's something I love doing, and it makes my soul very happy, and I'm happy that I get to have it and share it with people. And it's a beautiful thing.
And tell me how this beautiful thing is you're in school for music, and like we talked a bit about it before we began recording, and you're also in school for literature. And when you're in school for music, like how does that change the way you see music? Because like learning music, I think freestyle, you know, there's some people who never get formal education in music, you know, but they're able to connect with music. I love music. I've taken classes to learn the violin. I haven't played it in years. I can't play anymore because of my fingers, but I love music, and music for me is an escape. And like people always, and it sounds pedantic, but music is one of the only or if not, probably is the only form of language where you don't need any interpretation for it, you know, like anyone from anywhere around the world like can hear the same piece of music and they're able to like take something from it, and like you're able to communicate through music with people who don't speak your language. But when you're in school and you're learning now about the foundations of music, you're learning music theory, you know, you're learning about the history of music, and from like people like John Coltrane, or even like people like B.B. King, who was like a great jazz guitarist, and like, you know, Jimi Hendrix and all these kind of things. Like, how has that changed your perspective on music itself, but then also as a musician?
It definitely changed things, especially because growing up, I would have like one guitar instructor that I would see every other month. His name was Mr. Kim. Shout out Mr. Kim. But
he was in the video, right?
He was. And yeah, I was so used to just doing my own thing. I would just listen to a record and then I would just play that on guitar. Then at school, I'd be the only guitarist, so it would become my personality. And then coming to school where there's this curriculum and I'm in a room with 20 other kids that were also the only guitarists in their school, it definitely changes things, because it's like, oh, what am I doing? Who am I? And that was really hard for me to grapple with when I first came here to New York. So every other person I'd meet would be a guitarist who also grew up listening to Jimi Hendrix and John Coltrane and B.B. King. And I had a bit of an identity crisis, because I was like, for so long, I was so used to attaching myself to the instrument. I don't know who I am without it. And going to music school and learning about the roots of music and music theory, I've learned that I'm not necessarily the guitar, but the guitar is an addition to who I am. You know, as much as I love doing it, it doesn't mean anything if I'm just the guitar. It's an extension of who I am, and that's why I fell in love with it. That's why I fell in love with music for the first. I'm like stumbling on my words, but that's why I fell in love with music initially, because it was an extension of myself. It wasn't who I was. It was something that I used to further express myself. So going to music school has really opened my eyes to identity, to who I am.
And who do you see yourself? What do you see at yourself? What am I saying? How do you see yourself now versus when you went to school, when you first started going to school?
I see myself a lot more mature. The other day I had a recital for my guitar class, and it's about me, 2 sophomores, and then 5 freshmen. And we were all going around in a circle playing guitar. And it's funny, I saw myself in each of them, but there was this one particular freshman. He took a 7-minute long solo, and it was loud and it was crazy. He like played behind his head at one point, which was funny because I used to, like, that was my thing back in high school. I'd always play behind my head, and it was so crazy watching that, because it was like, whoa, like I understand where you're coming from. And then it was my turn to play. I took a 2-minute solo and took my time. I really, like, I felt it. And I don't think that's something I've ever had before prior to coming to New York. But it's like, I feel the music I'm playing now with so much more feeling. I don't know how to further express it, but I've learned it's a lot more quality over quantity. And that goes for so many things in life. And I just look at music in a much more mature way, I feel.
To be mature. Yes, that is a life lesson that many adults still have not learned. It is quantity river quality. That's like I will buy expensive shoes before I buy multiple cheap shoes. Different story. Nice. I digress. But and Marlon, like this is your first time making a documentary and almost like a full-length film. And like, tell me about the structuring of the film and like how you use music as a way to like structure the film and like inspire you as a filmmaker, because you're a filmmaker, because you start in the beginning of the film with Tyler playing Tyler and his band. It's Tyler and the Handsomes, right? And they're playing, and you begin the story there, but then you kind of backtrack and go back to the beginning, and then you end back up again, talking about his love of music and how music affects him and like just like what he wants to do as a musician. So talk about using Tyler's work as a musician and how that has influenced your work as a filmmaker and like making this documentary.
Well, I knew I wanted to start. You know how a lot of times films will start like kind of at the end, mm-hmm. and then they work then they begin and work their way back to where you started. That I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to use it as bookends as far as what his passion is, which is music. But the real spine, so to speak, there's many spines, but the real foundation even of his music journey was his martial arts journey. That's where he learned the discipline, the work ethic. And I think he would tell you that himself. And learning to deal with different types of people, having different instructors. But when he started into music, a lot of what he learned, his foundation of martial arts, helped him flourish even more so as far as having Mr. Kim, who speaks limited English at best, as his music, as you talked about music being universal and people. So that was interesting. The few times I'd sit in and watch him teach Tyler to Mr. Williams, different instructors. So I knew I wanted to have music in the beginning and music at the end, because that's who he is or how he wants to convey how he's feeling, what's on his mind, more so than talking, which he doesn't really like doing that much. So that's what I knew I wanted to do. And I also knew that I wanted to make something that was positive in nature, to where at the end people felt like, man, I have no excuse for not accomplishing something or going to work out, or because look at what he did. I didn't want to make something where everyone's crying like, oh my God, this kid look what he's gone through. Look what the family's gone through. I wanted to make something where people go like, wow, the glass is half full. And that was my goal. And so, okay, let me talk about the things in his life, whereas the illness is just a part of it, but it's most definitely not front and center. So that was my goal, for people to, come on, basically I took a lot of those video vlogs and intercut them into a story that's 53 minutes, where now just on the Amazon Prime US, it's 140 5-star reviews. And if you read some of them, it's really moving. The Vimeo reviews, the Amazon UK reviews, the Apple TV reviews, all are 5-star, all are, and it's not this was not where I used super expensive equipment and you see incredible stuff. It's a story, it's a story about a family. It's a story about a family that's gone through a lot. And, I wanted them to feel like they were in our family. That's what I wanted people to feel. I wanted them to feel at the end like, wow, if this kid could do this, I could do this. So that was my goal. And it's always interesting to me, because when different people watch it, or they'll contact me, and I'm always curious of what people take away from it, because everyone takes away something different. As you said, you can listen to the same song and you hear it, I hear this, you hear that, but we both have a feeling, so to speak. But that's what I wanted people to have, is a feeling, whatever that feeling might be. To some, it was like, oh my God, this dad is too much. The dad is doing too much, but I love everybody else. Or, I really love the sister. So everyone has something they take away from it. I'm just glad they take away something. That's better than they take away nothing and go like, wow, that was a waste of my time. So that was my goal. And that's music. Like he said, neither one of his parents do anything with music. And, truth be told, I've gone to every single thing every one of my kids have done. Both of them have done. And he would ask me, I'd go to a jazz thing and he'd say, Dad, did you like the music? And my response was always, I love you, son. Because I don't like jazz music or any music. So, but I love my son. So of course I'm always going to listen to whatever he does and talk about it and promote him, etc. But no, I'm not into music, but that's what I chose to do because I know that's who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you mean you don't love music? What do you mean? No. Yeah. I get you kind of with the music. Like I love jazz music, but I don't really like improv jazz music. That is not my thing. All I'm hearing like boo boo. I'm like, stop. I need something with structure. I need a beginning, a middle, and an end. But
no, I'm not the music person. No, not happening.
I love music. So like I'm with you on this, Tyler.
Thank you.
So we're gonna begin to wrap up now, but we want to ask the both of you, like, what's next for both of you? I know, Tyler, you're in school, but like, what's next for you on your journey? And like now, especially now that the film has been published and it's on these different platforms that your dad mentioned, like, what is next for you?
Oh man, that's what I want to figure out as well. It seems to be what everyone wants to know.
You know, right?
I don't know. I just put out an EP that I really love called Rosewood. I really enjoy all the words everyone is saying about In the Shed, and I'm having as much fun as I can, and I'm living life to the fullest every day by practicing and going to class and just staying happy. I want to keep on just living day to day and see where the music takes me. That's a very like broad answer, but
no, it's perfect.
That's what I'm doing.
It's perfect. Now, what about you, Marlon? Now that you are a filmmaker, you can call yourself a filmmaker. You're like, what is next for you?
Well, I have to say what's next for Tyler is next month he has a very, very big event at the Chelsea Pier where he's going to be playing for what's the organization, son? Do you know?
It's the CARES Foundation.
Right. Which is for, I forgot what illness they raise funds for, but he's going to be the featured musician there. They're in lovely New York City. So hopefully for Tyler, he'll be doing a lot of things all related to what his passion is, which will put him in a place where me and his mom can relax comfortably. So.
Okay. I have one final question that was at the back of my mind and I just remembered what it is. So you said, and I understand what you mean, where you said your disease does not define you, right? It's just a part of you. It's just like a part of your life, but it is not who you are. But when you're basically an advocate for awareness of like a particular disease, or like an advocate for awareness of like disabilities, and advocating for about awareness of disabilities and people with disabilities and people with chronic illness, like you do become known to people for that, like especially when you have like the website healingtyler.com and that kind of stuff. Like when you know that you're not defined by your illness, but that's how people kind of identify you because of your illness, like how are you able to separate that, and how are you able to process the way that people see you because of your illness?
It was really hard. Sometimes it still is really hard, feeling like that's the main thing people take away from me, especially those that see the documentary or browse through Healing Tyler. Even sometimes it's hard for me when I meet someone new and they're like, oh yeah, like we saw you with Ronda Rousey as a child, like you're the sick kid, right? And that was always the worst. And I think it's having a strong sense of self. That's what's worked out the best for me, knowing who I am and how I perceive myself and how those closest to me know what's going on. Because if you don't really have that strong sense of self. I feel like your skin isn't that thick, and however people define you, you're just going to stick with it, and it's really going to not even just affect how you see yourself, but affect how you see others. You know, you're going to be a lot more bitter. But I've been very fortunate to take that time and to see and to use patience and implement it in my life, to know who I am and how I see myself and what my strengths and weaknesses are and things that define me, and yeah, things like that.
Great. Thank you so much. And good luck. Oh, you want to finish off something there, Marlon?
Yeah, I wanted to say that from my perspective, like friends of mine that know Tyler, some people know Tyler for different reasons. Like some people know Tyler only as the musician, or specifically, some people know Tyler only as the guitar player or the jazz guitarist. But then there's people that know Tyler as the indie rock jazz singer for his singing stuff. That's a whole different group of people. Then you have people that remember Tyler just from jiu-jitsu. Then you have people from the chronic illness community or the nephrotic community who know him from that. So a lot of times I'll have friends of mine that don't know anything about his illness, but they know about him because they follow his music. And then they say, oh my God, I just saw the documentary. I had no idea he was, had an illness. So you have different groups of people that know him for different reasons. Am I correct there, Tyler?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. So in reference to when you said, what am I doing now? I say that because even though, and I'll backtrack, I grew up listening to Rod Stewart. So I'm a Rod Stewart person. But as far as like, if I'm at home or in the car, I don't really listen to music. No, never have. But in reference to what I do, I'm a coffee drinker, a massive coffee drinker. So I turned that into a business. I roast coffee, Ransom coffee beans. It's relevant because what I decided to do was use Tyler's jazz notes to match the flavor notes of certain single origin coffees. So if someone goes to ransomcoffeebeans.com, shameless plug, and they click on the Ethiopian natural single origin to see the description, they will see a video of Tyler playing music, and those music notes that he chose will match the flavor notes of the coffee. So that's what I do. And I love coffee. I love selling coffee. I love roasting coffee. So I'm a coffee snob, nerd type person, and I love it. So that's what I do.
Okay. So now we have that in common. I used to be a barista. So I used to work at a cafe, okay. And we used to play at so like I was trained as a barista, and we sold mostly Lavazza brand coffee. But yeah, so like I can see the connection with the music because like different coffee, like Arabica or whatever, they have different flavors and different notes and depths and stuff. So that's a way for you to connect to music. See, you're connected to the music.
What's your favorite single origin?
I'm not really a coffee drinker. The only reason I drink coffee is like kind of for the taste. Like it doesn't make me hyper or anything. Coffee actually makes me sleepy. So I don't really drink it that often. But when I used to work at the cafe, like the Arabica was my favorite. And I would usually make like a cappuccino with it, like, and that was more my thing because my friends were like, how are you not a coffee drinker working at cafe? I'm like, it's a job, okay. But yeah, so mine was probably Arabica. Yeah, I haven't had the Vats in years actually. I've been drinking mostly like Tim Hortons French vanilla, but But again, thank you so much to the both of you for speaking to me. This was so much fun, and it was great to learn about how multifaceted you are, Tyler, and also for you, Marlon, and your perspective as the director, also as his dad.
And respect to your mom. Respect to your mom.
Yes, I will give her a call today. So you know what, Mom? I appreciate you. I have to do that tonight.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. So everyone, that was another episode of Carolyn Talks for Here's What Happened podcast. And in this episode, I spoke to musician Tyler Ransom and his father, Marlon Ransom, for their film In the Shed, which is a documentary that Marlon created to chronicle Tyler's life and his experience with Nephrotic Syndrome, which is a chronic kidney disease, but also his love of jujitsu and music, and how those loves of Tyler's life have helped him to live with this chronic illness that he has. But the film, as you heard Tyler say in this interview, and as his father said, like, it's also about showing that his illness doesn't define him. And I think this is a film for people to learn again about this chronic illness, nephrotic syndrome, because it's a rare disease, and it's not one that many people know exists, and they aren't educated about. They aren't educated about it, but they also aren't educated about chronic illness as well, or about how to see people who are either visibly or invisibly disabled, how to see them as people. So this is also the great documentary to show how the people with this disease and many other invisible illnesses live full lives. You know, like Tyler, he does his jujitsu, he plays the saxophone, he plays the guitar, he has a band called Tyler and the Handsomes. You know, he's now a student at university, and his dad is just showing this amazing life that he's led, and this amazing person that Tyler is. So I think if the film is of course definitely worth seeing. It's on different streaming platforms like Amazon, he mentioned, and on Vimeo, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. I'll provide the links for those in the description box and on my social media posts when I post it. But thank you so much to Tyler and to Marlon for taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate Marlon reaching out to me, because if he hadn't, I wouldn't have known about this film, and I wouldn't have known about Tyler and the work that he's doing and the life that he's led. And again, this is just another example, like, never judge a book by its cover. You know, me with my own chronic illness, I have had to remind myself. Sometimes I even forget that I'm chronically ill, which sounds ridiculous, but it happens sometimes. But it's just, again, which I think is also good, because it just keeps me centered and remind myself I am more than my disease, you know, and Tyler is more than his disease. And like everyone who has these kind of illnesses and has disabilities, we are more than our disabilities. So everyone, if you get the chance, please watch In the Shed. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at CarrieCNH. So that's your ECNH12. You will find links to this episode of Carolyn Talks. You can find the video version of this episode of Carolyn Talks on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@Carolyn_Hines. You can go to my R3 page. That's AUTHORY.com/Carolyn Hines. That's HINDS. And find links to other episodes of Carolyn Talks, other episodes of my YouTube channel, other episodes of So Here's What Happened, which is my main podcast that I post with my friend Lanisha Campbell, which is a monthly podcast we do where we discuss films, TV shows, manga, books, comics, all the good entertainment stuff. And you can find links to all of my reading, and you can find links to all of my published writing, reviews, analysis, interviews, and profiles. And I think that's it. So until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone, stay safe. Bye.